Nuclear energy will undoubtedly lead us towards a dystopian and irradiated future, as disasters such as Chernobyl have proven, right? Well, it may not be so clear-cut. As nuclear energy has been muddled by public perception, it is in fact safer than fossil fuels, while also being an efficient and abundant source of energy for the future. Currently, global warming is one of the largest challenges humanity has ever faced, as we need to transition from a world ran by fossil fuels into a world ran by low-carbon alternatives. For this to happen, scientists intend to prevent the global average temperature from rising more than 2 degrees Celsius by making all of our energy production carbon neutral. According to the 2020 BP Statistical Review of World Energy, today, 84.3% of global energy output is produced by fossil fuels, with only 15.7% coming from low-carbon sources. Of these low-carbon sources, 2.2% is wind, 1.1% is solar, 4.3% is nuclear, and 6.4% is hydroelectric. Looking at this graph from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, you can see that since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, CO2 levels have increased by 130 parts per million to a record high of nearly 410 parts per million. When over the past million years, that value has never risen above 300 parts per million. Parts per million is merely a measure of the number of CO2 particles per million air particles. Furthermore, carbon emissions have been exponentially increasing over the past 2 centuries due to the exponential growth of our population. And although popular renewables like solar and wind are improving, they will not be enough to reverse climate change before it is too late. And with the need for viable low-carbon energy undeniable, and since solar and wind lack the capacity to make significant change, nuclear energy provides a viable option to reduce emissions for the future. One major part of this is the energy density of nuclear fuel. According to the European Nuclear Society, 1 kilogram of coal can generate 8 kilowatt hours of energy, and 1 kilogram of oil can produce 12.5 kilowatt hours of energy, while 1 kilogram of uranium-235 can produce 24 million kilowatt hours of energy. To put this into perspective, 24 million kilowatt hours of energy is enough to power the average U.S. household for the next 2,000 years. Another advantage of nuclear energy is that it produces no carbon emissions from direct energy production, with the only emissions connected to nuclear energy being fossil fuel emissions from the mining and processing of uranium. And while nuclear energy is not technically renewable, as there is a finite amount of uranium that can be mined, the energy density of uranium makes it a viable source of emission-free fuel for centuries to come. And while nuclear energy has many upsides, as I have already stated, there are many who believe that nuclear energy is dangerous and irresponsible to pursue, as the waste produced can remain radioactive for thousands of years, and nuclear disasters can have disastrous effects on the environment. But, according to the Nuclear Energy Institute, all nuclear waste ever produced worldwide since the late 1950s would only cover a standard American football field to a depth of 10 yards. In comparison, worldwide coal plants produce the same amount of waste each hour. Also, another reason that nuclear waste is not as serious as one may believe is that nuclear engineers from institutions such as MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and INL, the Idaho National Laboratory, which is actually the place where the first nuclear reactor was ever built, these institutions have been building prototype reactors that can use nuclear waste as fuel for further fission reactions. And the waste produced by these reactors is much less dangerous to the environment. On the topic of nuclear disasters, such as Chernobyl and Fukushima, while these disasters are undeniably terrible, the World Health Organization estimates that Chernobyl killed 4,000 people, and the Japanese government has reported only 1 direct death from radiation due to the Fukushima incident. To put this into perspective, over the course of nuclear energy's history, the average deaths per terawatt hour, as shown by this graph, is only 0.07 deaths per terawatt hour. When compared to coal, which has an average death of 30 per terawatt hour, nuclear is obviously much safer. And to put a terawatt hour into perspective, 1 terawatt hour can power 93,000 U.S. households for an entire year. So, overall, nuclear energy is far safer than any method of fossil fuels. And the technology that already exists today has the capacity to reduce carbon emissions drastically. Unfortunately, public perception on nuclear energy is warped due to groups like the anti-nuclear movement that have lobbied against nuclear energy, making the creation of new nuclear plants a more difficult prospect. Ultimately, it would be foolish for humanity to not take advantage of the plentiful energy nuclear fission can provide, so that we may preserve our beautiful planet before it is too late. Thank you.